Surprisingly, over 90% of viewers haven't subscribed yet. If you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button. It motivates us to keep creating and helps us never miss an upload. The week leading up to my birthday felt ordinary in that comforting, dangerous way. We were busy in parallel lines, her with end-of-quarter events, me closing out a client build that had eaten my weekends. Evenings were soft and forgettable. Reheated leftovers, a show half-watched, her scrolling, me answering emails I should have ignored. On Tuesday, she closed her laptop, leaned across the couch, and tapped my chest with 2 fingers like she was pressing a button. "Friday," she said. "Dress sharp. I made a reservation. No arguing, no, let's just order in. I'm taking you out." "You? Taking me?" I joked. She rolled her eyes and kissed the top of my head. "Yes, you unromantic carpenter. Let me handle this one." I let it land. She'd been saying for months that I didn't celebrate myself enough, that I made everything practical. Maybe this was her way of nudging me toward joy. I pictured dim light, a quiet corner, a dessert with a candle I'd pretend to hate and secretly love. I pictured her hand finding mine across the table the way it used to when a room was noisy and we wanted a private channel. Wednesday night, I borrowed her tablet to check a recipe I'd saved in our shared notes. A banner slid in at the top of the screen, the kind of preview you don't mean to read but can't unsee once it's lit. It said simply, "Can't wait to see his face." A heart emoji and a champagne bottle followed. The sender's name wasn't one of her usual friends. The tablet vibrated again, corner table confirmed, he'll never guess. It was the digital equivalent of a whisper outside a door you just happened to open. I didn't scroll. I closed the app, put the tablet back where I found it, and stood very still while the kettle clicked 2 rooms away. The air in the house changed a degree. Nothing loud, just a pressure shift, like weather rolling in far off. She came in humming, asked if I wanted mint or ginger, and I said mint please because my mouth had gone strangely dry. That night I lay awake cataloging the year behind us. Not for evidence, just for shape. The sharp climb of her new wardrobe, the way strategy drinks had replaced the gym. Laughter from the hall when she took calls on speaker, and then, as the months wore on, the phone flipped face down, her thumb hovering over the power button when she set it on the counter. None of it was a crime. People develop new habits. But the curve of it all bent somewhere I didn't recognize. On Thursday afternoon, between sanding a walnut slab and measuring a miter, I drove across town to the bakery that decorates like it's a language. Glass display full of small miracles, cases fogged with breath and sugar. The baker behind the counter looked like she'd iced 10,000 edges and still loved the 11,000. I asked how far they could go with a custom edible image. "We can print most things if the file's clear," she said. "Even text. People do collages all the time." "Not a collage," I said, and surprised myself with how level my voice sounded. "Just a single image, crisp." "Pick up Friday?" she asked, verifying the time. 6:30? 6, I said. "If that's okay?" She smiled and scribbled my name. "We'll be ready." Back at the shop, I told myself that ordering a cake wasn't an accusation. It was preparation for any version of the night. I could always swap in a plain top if I'd misread everything and be grateful forever that I had. But I knew, deep down where intuition keeps its quiet math, that I wasn't wrong. Thursday evening, she breezed in with a garment bag and the kind of bright mood that has a gloss you can see from across the room. "Don't peek," she said, hooking the bag over the closet door. "I want to blow your mind." "You always do," I said, and meant it with a nostalgia that stung. We ate simple pasta. She told me about a coworker who got engaged at a rooftop bar everyone pretends not to know. I asked if she thought the ring was tasteful because we used to grade jewelry together like judges on a show. She laughed and said it was a billboard on a finger, then floated into our room to try on the dress. When she came back, she didn't ask what I thought. She already knew she looked good. The question wasn't invited. I watched her reflection catch the hallway mirror, poise, new perfume, the grip of someone rehearsing how the night would feel. After she fell asleep, I sat in the study and opened the portal to our Cell account. We share it for discounts. Nothing mysterious. I've never looked at the itemized call log because why would you stare at a heart rate when it's steady? Tonight I looked. Numbers I knew, family, friends, Then a number I didn't recognize, returning like a metronome. 11:49 p.m., 6:04 a.m., noon and 28 seconds. Whole evening stitched together with 23-minute blocks. I scribbled the digits on a sticky note, not to trap her, but to run it once through a search just to see if it belonged to a contractor, a delivery service, an old client mislabeled. The reverse lookup coughed up a name, and the profile photo, public, smiling, full of teeth, was the kind of face that knows how to shine in group pictures without standing dead center. I didn't click deeper. I didn't want their vacation albums. I wanted truth in its smallest, least negotiable unit. Friday morning, she lined my tie against my shirt and smoothed the fabric like she used to before weddings. "Navy," she said, sharp, but not trying. She kissed my cheek and whispered happy birthday in a tone that made me dizzy with the uncanny, like hearing a familiar song played a half step down. On her way out, she said, 8 o'clock, don't be late, I'll meet you there. I left for the shop, shook hands on a delivery, and at lunch pulled into the bakery's small lot. The cake box was heavier than it looked, like it held a little gravity of its own. The top was simple, a border, a few dots, space reserved for the image. I slid the USB across the counter. The baker didn't read it aloud. She didn't even look at me differently. She simply nodded, loaded the file, and said, "It will be clean." At 5:30, I drove to the restaurant to speak with the manager in person. There are favors phones won't get you. I introduced myself and said I had a surprise for a birthday dinner, no sparkler, nothing loud. "Just a cake I'll bring in before 8, I said, "and one small request." He'd been doing this long enough to read subtext. "Is it going to cause a problem?" he asked, professional concern sliding under the politeness. "It might cause a silence," I said. "I'd appreciate a discreet table." He looked at the reservation list on his screen, then back at my face like he was weighing the difference between policy and kindness. "Corner booth," he said. "Soft light, enough buffer you won't feel on display." "Thank you." "And for the moment itself?" he asked. "You want us to sing?" I smiled despite myself. "No choir, just place it, please, then step back." "As you wish." He paused, then added, "We'll bring it out smooth. If you need to slip out afterward, tell me and I'll open the side hall." "I plan to go out the front door," I said, "but I appreciate the escape hatch." At 6:15, I slid the cake into their care. The server peeked under the lid and exhaled very softly, a sound people make when they can't say anything useful. "We'll keep it level," he said, as if the truth might slide off if the cart rattled. At 7:50, I arrived at the host's stand. The restaurant was the right kind of room. Warm wood, brass that's been touched by hundreds of hands, low conversation like velvet on the ear. The host guided me past couples who glowed with special occasion and to the corner where light pooled like honey. I sat with my back to the corridor and a clean line of sight to the entrance and the hallway to the restrooms. "It's a carpenter's habit. Know your exits, know your vantage," she texted at 7:58. "Running 2 minutes behind, don't kill me." I wrote back a thumbs up because any other word might wobble, and I wasn't wobbling tonight. At 8:03, the entrance reflected a flash of winter, and she stepped inside, shaking the cold off her shoulders like a performer shedding a cloak. Beautiful, of course. The dress was a dark green that made the room's ambers turn her skin to candlelight. She scanned the room, found me, and smiled like everything had already gone her way. The host led her, but halfway to me she paused, pivoted, and waved. Another man, tailored jacket, that public smile, had just been seated at the bar. She touched his arm as she passed, a quick press of fingers, casual if you didn't know to watch for it. Then she reached the table and kissed my cheek. "You beat me," she said, "barely." I stood, pulled her chair. My hands were steady. Inside, some part of me stepped into a glass box and closed the door. Not to shut her out, to keep me in. She looked over the menu like she hadn't memorized it days ago. "This place is impossible to book," she said. "You must have used your secret charm." "I asked," I replied. "Sometimes that's all it takes." We ordered like people who know how to act in nice rooms. She chose verbs that turned the night into a story: celebrate, savor, toast. I nodded. If you squinted, we looked perfect. If you read the scene, you felt a hinge waiting for weight. Halfway through the second course, she excused herself for a minute, grazing my shoulder with the back of her hand as she stood. That touch used to be a signal for "I'm yours." Tonight, It felt like I'm in control. She walked toward the hallway. The man at the bar slid off his stool exactly 30 seconds later and took the long path around to enter from the terrace, not the main aisle, the way you might if you didn't want it to look like choreography. He reached our table with a grin he probably practices in mirrored elevator doors. "Forgive me," he said, like a joke he'd told before. "I couldn't let a table like this go to waste with just two." I gestured to the empty chair. "By all means," I said. "Sit." He sat. He didn't offer his name. He assumed I knew it. His thumb smoothed the fold of his napkin, a tell he probably didn't realize he had. He began talking the way people do when they're selling a mood. Small jokes, quick wins. We should all try that new place on 3rd. He didn't ask me anything. He didn't need my lines. She returned a breath later, paused as if she'd just stumbled upon a coincidence, then did the bright smile again. "I ran into him by the bar," she said. "Total surprise. You don't mind, do you? More the merrier." "It's your night," I said. "It's your night," she corrected, and laughed, the sound pure treble. The manager wound his way through the room like a man moving chess pieces without touching them. He registered the 3rd chair without changing expression. He caught my eye briefly and adjusted his path by 2 degrees. To him I aimed the smallest nod, as if to say, "Yes, proceed." The thing about a long betrayal is that by the time you reach the moment happens to you very slowly. You notice the server checking water glasses as ballast for the energy. You notice the couple 2 tables over debating whether to split the last oyster. You notice the candle on your table doing its best not to gutter. You notice your breathing and decide to keep it. They talked over the main course like people ducking under rain and pretending they aren't getting wet. I asked him twice about his work, and both times he answered with the kind of glitter people throw when they're padding a resume in real time. She nodded at everything he said, as if agreeing would turn it into a better version of the world. When the plates cleared, the waiter said, "Will there be a dessert to share?" And I said, "There will," and he understood what exactly that meant. From the kitchen door, the cart appeared, not theatrical, just the serene roll of something inevitable. The manager walked half a pace behind like a witness. The server guided the cart to the open space by our booth and lifted the lid with a reverence I'll remember as long as I live. Candles lit. Buttercream, perfect. And centered, crisp and unblinking. The screenshot. Names at the top, bubble colors unmistakable, the line I'd seen in that preview now fixed in sugar. Corner table confirmed. He'll never see us coming. She leaned in, ready to aim her smile. Then she read. Watching her face was like watching tide retreat too quickly. Color pulled away, eyes widened, lips parted around a breath she couldn't find. Her hand rose, fell, fluttered like she might smooth a wrinkle and erase a sentence. He squinted, leaned closer, and realized what he was reading one phrase at a time. The confidence dropped from his shoulders and landed with a soft interior thud. He looked at me for the first time as if I were a person, not a prop. "What is this?" "A birthday cake," I said, "with the theme you planned." 2 tables went quiet, the way polite rooms do when something true steps into them. The server stepped back out of the cone of heat, hands folded at his apron. A professional disappearing act. The manager remained, still and humane, as if proximity could temper humiliation into lesson. No one shouted. There were no broken glasses. Only the hush that follows when performance ends and only script remains. She finally managed, "How could you print?" I said. Very carefully. Her eyes went glassy with anger and something older. "This isn't fair." "You're right," I said. Fair would have been honesty. She made a sound that might have been a laugh if it had more air in it. He placed his napkin down with precision, already calculating exits. The candles burned on, little steady suns. I didn't touch the knife. I didn't make a speech. I let the room do its work. And in that work I felt the oddest relief, like stepping off a porch and finding the ground exactly where your foot expected it, after months of guessing at the drop. "Boxes, please," I said to the server when he reappeared at the edge of our small weather system. He nodded and retreated. She stared at the cake like it might leap back into batter. "We should go," she said. "We will," I answered, "when the candles are out." They burned, then guttered, each sending up a thread of smoke that twisted and was gone. The server boxed the cake with a grace that looked like forgiveness. The manager asked if I wanted the side hall. I told him no. He inclined his head once in respect for someone who still preferred the front door. I set my card on the leather. He, her friend, reached for his wallet with jerky dignity. Separate checks appeared as if they'd been printed in advance. The pen wrote my name without shaking. We stood, chairs scraped. A couple at the next table smiled at us like maybe this was normal. At the entrance, the winter air pressed its cool palm against my face. She followed me to the car, no longer bright, just small. All the lines before this had been rehearsal. Now the play would begin. The drive, the kitchen island, the box set between us, the actual words that would end the story we'd been pretending to be in. But the reveal belonged to Friday night, and Friday night had been honest. For my birthday, my wife booked a table and brought a guest. I brought a cake and let the truth cut itself. The candles flickered as if they knew their light was exposing more than faces. The cake sat between us, its frosting clean, its message undeniable. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for escape, but every exit had witnesses. He shifted in his chair, leaning back as if distance could erase the words staring up from the top of the cake. The server stood frozen at the edge of the table, trying to look invisible, while conversations from other tables began to fade into whispers. I leaned back in my chair, calm, steady. "Happy birthday to me," I said softly, though the words were for her, not for me. Her lips trembled. You set this up?" I let the silence stretch before I answered. "You set it up. I just chose the frosting." The room had gone still enough that I could hear the faint pop of a candle wick. She blinked fast, fighting tears not out of shame but out of the humiliation of being caught so openly. Her friend cleared his throat, desperate to restore some control. "This is unnecessary," he muttered. I turned to him, my voice even. "Unnecessary is sneaking into another man's life and pretending it's a game. Tonight is clarity." He pushed back from the table. "I don't need this," he muttered again, but his hand shook slightly as he folded his napkin. He stood and left without another glance at her. His shoulders looked smaller than when he'd walked in, his confidence gone. The door shut behind him with a sound that felt like punctuation. She stared after him, then back at me. "Why would you do this here?" she whispered harshly. "Because this is where you chose to do it," I replied. "You brought him into my birthday dinner. I brought the truth into yours." Her chest rose and fell quickly, like someone trying to breathe in thin air. "You could have talked to me privately." "I tried," I said, steady. "For months I tried. But you wanted an audience. You wanted a story. I simply gave you the ending." The waiter, nervous but professional, stepped forward. "Shall I box the cake, sir?" "Yes," I said. "Thank you." As he wheeled the cake away, the whispers grew behind us. I didn't care what the room thought. It wasn't about them. It was about her seeing that the mask had slipped, and there was no way to put it back on. When the bill came, I didn't look at her. I placed my card inside, signed the receipt, and stood. She followed slowly, her steps unsteady, her face pale. We walked through the dining room together, eyes on us, though no one spoke. The cold air outside hit us both like a wall. She turned to me on the sidewalk, her voice breaking. "Please, let's go home and talk about this. Don't make this the end." I looked at her, the woman I had once loved, the woman I had built years with, and I felt nothing but clarity. This was the end the moment you decided someone else belonged at my table. The drive home was silent. She kept opening her mouth like she wanted to speak, then closing it again. The cake box sat on the back seat, heavy and undeniable, like a witness riding home with us. When we got inside, I placed the box on the kitchen counter. She hovered nearby, wringing her hands, her voice trembling. "It wasn't what you think. It was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to go this far." I laughed softly, not with humor, but disbelief. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is missing a call. Planning to humiliate me on my birthday isn't a mistake. It's a decision. Her tears came then, hot and fast. "Please, we can fix this." I cut her off with a raised hand. "You're right, we can fix it. That's why I already met with a lawyer. The accounts are secured, the house is mine, the business is untouchable. You can leave with what you brought in. Nothing more. Her knees buckled slightly, and she grabbed the counter for support. You already... I knew before tonight, I said. The texts were just confirmation. I let you walk into your own trap because you needed to see it for yourself. She sank onto a stool, her face in her hands. You're throwing everything away. No, I corrected. You did that. I'm just cleaning up the mess. For the next hour she pleaded, begged, shouted, and cried. I said little. Every word she threw at me was just another reminder of the choices she'd made. Eventually, exhausted, she stormed into the guest room and slammed the door. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the cake. I opened the box and looked down at the blurred edges of the printed messages. The frosting smudged slightly from the server's careful handling. I cut myself a slice, placed it on a plate, and took a bite. Sweet, rich, honest. The next morning she tried to access our accounts. Every attempt failed. By the afternoon she called me from behind the guest room door, her voice desperate. The cards aren't working. What did you do? I didn't answer. 2 weeks later she moved out. Her friend never came back. Word spread through her circle, quiet but sharp. She lost friends, lost her reputation, and eventually lost her job. People whispered about the restaurant scene, about the cake, about the texts written in sugar for everyone to see. As for me, I rebuilt. My business grew. I found peace in the quiet of evenings without lies. And every year, when my birthday comes, I order a cake from the same bakery. Simple, no photos, just clean frosting and a candle. And as I blow it out, I remember the night the truth sat on top of the cake, and silence did all the work I never had to. That was the real gift, not the cake, not the reveal, but the peace that came after. She thought she had written the story of my humiliation, but I was the one who wrote the ending.